Hello and Assalamu alaikum. I am Parvez Khan. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Kuhat University of Science and Technology. The subject is National and International Affairs. The course code is GMC 341. It's our lecture number 15, which is Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Previously called as the Organization of Islamic Conference, but now it's changed. It's the OIC we'll be talking about. So before starting our session, we'll talk about the objectives. What are the objectives? Obviously, the students will be able to understand the historical context of Organization of Islamic Cooperation. They will be able to develop a better understanding of its vision and mission, and then we'll be able to critically analyze its achievement and shortcomings. Obviously, it's a big organization, it's a big representative organization of Muslim countries around the globe. So it's important to talk about its significance, its representations, its achievements, and shortcomings. So we'll be talking about this in our today's session. This is the new logo, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation that we're seeing, and this is changed from the other logo. So, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation (OIC) is the largest organization after the United Nations with a membership of 57 states spread over 4 continents. The organization was established upon a decision of the historical summit which took place in Rabat, Morocco, Kingdom of Morocco, on the 12th of Rajab 1389 Hijrah, which is obviously 25 September 1969. And it followed the criminal arson of Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied Jerusalem. And we'll talk about more in historical context in a while. And the first OIC charter was adopted by the third ICFM session held in 1972. The charter laid down the objectives and principles of the organization, and fundamental purpose is to strengthen the solidarity and cooperation among the member states. So it's important to understand the historical context. OIC came into existence shortly after the Arab-Israel War in 1967, and the leader of the Muslim world met in Rabat on 25th September to form an organization. It was formed after an attack on Al-Aqsa Mosque in 1969. So basically, there's a lot of history to it. It's Arab-Israel War, and then obviously some arson and the criminal attack on the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The fire was there. The fire incident provoked the Muslim countries because Al-Aqsa Mosque is the third most holiest site in Islam, and it's considered very important from a religious point of view, and it has special sentiments Muslims hold for that, for the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So it prompted the Muslim countries to look into this matter seriously. Now let's talk about the objectives of the OIC, especially after what happened the Al-Aqsa Mosque incident. The Muslim world united, the new gatherings of Muslims, the new community, the new organization came into existence, and it brought forward certain objectives, and which are under the charter. The organization aims to strengthen the Islamic solidarity among the member states, and the cooperation in the political, economic, social, cultural, and scientific fields, and the struggle of all Muslim to safeguard their dignity, independence, and national rights. So this is some of the objectives, from economic to safeguarding, and obviously to coordinate the action to safeguard the holy places. That's important. The most important is that Makkah, Medina, and the holy places. And one of the aims, particularly when we see the growing threat from the non-Muslim world and the growing atrocities by some of the imperial powers, there's a big concern that concerns the leadership of the Muslim world is to safeguard their holy places, and obviously support the struggle of the Palestinian people and assist them in recovering their rights and liberating their occupied territories. So this is one of the few objectives that came forward, and obviously to work to eliminate racial discrimination and all forms of colonialism that exist. This is one of the top priorities of the OIC's charter, to eliminate all kinds of racial discrimination and all forms of colonialism, because obviously Muslim countries have been colonies of the Western countries for a long time, and there have been issues regarding the colonial setup which is basically class systems there, and there's some issues regarding racism, discrimination that has taken place, and secondly, to create a favorable atmosphere for the promotion of cooperation and understanding between the member states and other countries. Another important point about the OIC is to create a favorable atmosphere for the promotion of cooperation and understanding between member states and other countries. This is the first time any Muslim organization that has an organization has been formed that leads Muslim countries, and it talks about Muslim solidarity and peace, and to develop cooperation between the member states and all these. And then let's talk about the principle of OIC. And obviously, some of the principles are the total equality between the member states, respect of sovereignty. And now let's look into the principles of OIC. What are the core principles? What are the driving force that's behind the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which is we're looking forward to? The first one is the total equality between the member states. OIC ensures that member states are equal, there's mutual respect of the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of each member state. That's important because equality is where you can speak on equal terms and respect for each other's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity is of key importance. That's when you come to negotiations, that's when you come to talk, that's when you come to understanding problems, because from a position of power, you just dominate, you just don't listen. So that's important. And then obviously, the next one is a settlement of any conflict that may arise by peaceful means, negotiation, mediation, reconciliation, or arbitration. OIC looks forward to settle the conflicts that may arise through peaceful means, either by negotiation, by mediation, and this is why it's important to talk about arbitration as well. And obviously, abstention from the threat and use of force against the territorial integrity, national unity, or political independence of any member state. The OIC is focused and it prefers sovereignty. It stays far from political interference in any countries, and avoid using threats. So this is what OIC core principles are when it comes to their theoretical principles that they've laid down. But there's a lot to discuss when it comes to practical grounds. And respect of the self-determination and non-interference in the domestic affairs of any member states. OICs make sure that no country will directly or indirectly, they will not interfere in any country's domestic affair as long as they are a member of the state. And this is what their key principles are. And this is one of the historical pictures that the OIC that took place in Lahore in February 1974. All the world leaders were there in the Bachai Mosque, one of the most iconic pictures that we see, and it expresses and shows the time when how seriously the Muslim world was working together, was uniting together from Libya, from Saudi Arabia, from Pakistan, every country. And this is the time when Pakistan also recognized Bangladesh, and this is an important time period. So the importance of OIC was that it helped solving the local affairs arising between the two countries. A very important time period. So now let's talk about the main bodies of the OIC. What are the main bodies of the OIC? Well, the first one that we'll talk about, the first important thing is the top leadership of any country. How top leadership participates in the OIC is also very important because it's called the Conference of Kings and Government. It's the supreme authority of the organization, which meets once every 3 years to lay down the organization's policy. So the Muslim leadership, the head of the states, they're very important members of this party. They lay their points, they dictate. That's what they can do. They can formulate policies, but they meet every 3 years. And the second one to this one is the Conference of Foreign Ministers, which meets once a year to examine a progress report on the implementation of its decision taken within the framework of the policy defined by the Islamic Summit. It looks to the policies, the decisions taken, it talks about the frameworks. It's a very important body of the OIC as well because it keeps on foreign ministers meet much more frequent. It's much more like it's once a year compared to the head of the states, and this is an important body of the OIC. The next one we have is General Secretariat, which is the executive organ of the organization. and since because the general secretariat of people and with the implementation of the decision of the parties of the preceding bodies, and this is why it's the executive organ of the general secretariat, that is which is the executive organ of the organization. So these are the three main bodies of the OIC: the Conference of Kings and Head of the State, and the governments, and obviously the Conference of Foreign Ministers, the General Secretariat, and then this is one. So the next one we're going to talk about regional players for Pakistan is China and Pakistan. It's important now to look into the present context. The circumstances have changed for the Muslim world after 9/11. We have talked about the main bodies, we've talked about their principles, but circumstances changed a lot for the Muslim world after 9/11 because Iraq was invaded by the imperial powers, and we've seen Afghanistan being invaded. There have been some terrorism related incidents, and the Muslim world have been accused of fueling fire. So that's the context where the Muslim world really should look into its effectiveness as an organization. And so some Muslim countries were invaded by imperial powers, we just spoke about it. And OIC could not come up with stance and unified stance in addressing the global Muslim crisis. Muslims have faced discrimination around the world. There have been some critical problems, particularly from immigrations, from detentions, from racism, to all kinds of structural and non-structural problems that have confronted Muslim world, particularly in the Western world as well. We've seen a lot of hatred going on, particularly with the Islamophobia that has recently escalated in the last 2 decades. That has another big problem because in the first 10 years after the 9/11, there were some serious accusations of labeling Muslims as terrorists, and that created a lot of problems for individuals and even some of the countries. And that's where the OIC stance has been completely absent. They just denied, they condemned some of the things that were serious enough, but they didn't do much about it. And this is the present context as well, that we have to look into the unresolved issues. Some of the unresolved issues that are still pending are Palestine, Kashmir, Iraq, Afghanistan, global Muslim crisis, the Muslim economy, and all these issues are still very much there. They have not been resolved, and one needs to look into it because Palestine is obviously it's a big issue. It has taken decades, and it's taken a lot of time since the OIC has been made the stance about Palestine, but nothing practical has been seen so far. We've seen the expansion of Israeli state in the Palestinian regions and the atrocities over the years. We've seen that, but there's not a lot. There's not a lot that's been done to address the core problems of the Muslim world. Then obviously Kashmir. Most recently, we have seen the Kashmir issue once again coming to limelight, and particularly after India annexed it in 2019. Um, and that's where a big problem arose, and the Kashmiri rights and the OIC, there's not been much from them as well. Pakistan have also challenged Saudi Arabia in the recent times about the stance on Kashmir, and Pakistan and Turkey have given strong statements regarding Kashmir and Palestine. On the other hand, some of the Muslim countries are moving ahead and making and creating ties with Israel despite the Palestinian issue being resolved. So that's a point of concern for Pakistan as well, because recently United Arab Emirates, UAE, they just developed some relationships, and there was some breakthrough in their diplomatic ties with Israel. That was a point of concern for the Muslim world and Pakistan. There's been pressure on Pakistan to establish relationship, but Pakistan, since its inception, has been very clear. They've said that they will not be making any ties with Israel until and unless a Palestinian solution comes forward, which has not been the case so far. And this indicates the absence of OIC, because you can see that the war in Iraq and Afghanistan were devastating. It just even after that, we can see in Syria the circumstances, and obviously there's a fight going on between there's a disturbance going on between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, but OIC has remained silent. It's obviously two Muslim countries, and Yemen is on the losing side because of its economy, because of its health crisis, and there's been some serious human rights abuses everywhere. But there's been little stance, little discussions into the play which is a point of concern because it's such a big organization, OIC, and there's not been much that's been observed. And similarly, when we talk about developmental issues regarding the Muslim world, there have been serious economic issues because most of the Muslim countries have serious economic crisis. Only few countries have a good economic situation, but other than that, there have been economic crisis, which obviously affects the educational infrastructure as well, and development, and obviously health crisis, and all these issues are there. And most importantly, when OIC is being criticized, it's about the Muslim identity and representation. Has OIC fulfilled that after, particularly after 9/11 situation? Has it been able to address issues that confronts Muslim identity and representation in the modern world? And the discrimination that's taking place, the identity construction of Muslims, how they're constructed and how they're labeled as terrorists, and how it's all happening. I think that's a big point of concern. And some countries obviously have handled the issue better, but obviously racism and is always there when it comes to ethnic and religious identities. And Muslims have faced the most of the circumstances that have changed over the years, and they've been at the core end of it. So this is what the OIC is. Theoretically, we have seen it's good in principle. It was formed as a unified organization that could cater the need for the Muslim world, that could talk about the Muslim community, that could uplift the morale and stand together in terms of crisis, and particularly starting from the Arab-Israeli war onwards. Theoretically, it looked that it will address many issues if Muslim world is united, if there's a concept of ummah and all of them come together. Why not? There can be 100 solutions to a lot number of problems. What we have seen that despite 40, 50 years, we have seen that the Palestine issue is still pending, Kashmir issue is still pending. There have been wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, and all the Muslim world is on fire, and obviously most of it is in fire and it's been suffering, and OIC has been not been able to help in that regard completely, and that's one of its downfalls. That theoretically it looks good on paper, it sounds like it's one of the powerful organization, but little it has done to address the core problems of the Muslim world. But still, there's a lot of potential. A lot can be done, and the key points for future are that will OIC change its policies to the rising needs of the Muslim world? How will it deal with Kashmir issue and Palestine issue? And obviously, is there any difference between OIC on paper and OIC on ground? And importantly, the most important point that comes to our mind at this moment of time is that the concept of Ummah. Will OIC consider the concept of Ummah, or are there any strategic interests? For instance, will there any be peace between, or there will be political difference between the blocks that are existing over there, like Saudi Arabia or Iran? Will they ever be able to come on terms, or will there be ideological differences or something like that? Will OIC be able to help to carve out differences between the two countries, or the differences between the two countries, or something that can help development in the Muslim world? So these are some of the key points for future, because if they are looking for it, they have to change its policies to the rising need of the Muslim world first. How will it deal with Kashmir issue and Palestine issue? And then what is the difference between the OIC on paper and OIC ground? They have to look into it. They have to critically analyze it, because this is important. Theoretically, it looks like an outstanding organization with 57 member states with a lot of power and obviously important role to play by each individual country. But what's happening on the ground? Are there still differences between the two countries? Will the concept of Ummah work? Is it the right time for the Muslim world to reunite in the same spirit as it started in its initial days? So this is what is happening, because in the last 40, 50 years, it is being accused of bureaucratic red tapeism. The processes are slow. Meetings just help the people. Some even accuse that meetings are held where people go out and have international tours. They just meet each other and come back. There's little practical implications after that, and it's a point of concern. When you look at the Muslim world, the problem is facing some serious concerns, and obviously imperial powers or those in powers, Muslim world has a lot to do about it and to address the differences. And obviously, it's not just about the Muslim world. Has OIC been able to build relationship with the Western world or the other countries, the developed countries, have they been able to discuss economic terms such as the European Union, the model? So, because at the end of the day, economics also matter. So we have just reached the end of our session, and before we close, we just talk about the questions. How do you see the role of OIC? Do you think that there's a need for revision of its policies? What is your opinion about the concept of Ummah and OIC? How do you see that connection? The more questions you can think about, it will give you a better perspective and a better understanding of OIC. And these are some of the references that we've used. And, some of this you can take help from this as well. So we'll be in touch. I hope you enjoyed the session today. It was detailed discussion on the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. We must remember that it's a strong union. It's a big bond of 57 member states. It's strong on paper, but it still needs some revision. But it has a lot of potential for the future of the Muslim community, the Muslim world, and the Ummah in general. So we'll be talking more about such topics in the future. I hope you enjoyed the session. See you soon. Thank you very much.